I need a guy who's smart.
Suiting trainers works for me.
And someone who can make the tie.
Ah, now that's my speciality.
Doctor Who starts Saturday the 31st of March on BBC One.
The best adventures begin in the most exotic locations. In the early years, meet characters you could only dream of. With a really wild imagination. Age 3 and we're off to Africa. Lights, action! Oh, closet film buffs. What could that be? Buffalo! Age 6 and we're really flying. Somebody notify air traffic control. What an incredible adventure. With new programmes for all ages.
For little people.
This is BBC One. Now, the 10 o'clock news with Fiona Bruce and Geraint Hughes.
A diplomatic crisis is sparked between Britain and Iran as 15 British sailors and Marines are seized off the coast of Iraq. They were captured at gunpoint when they boarded a ship suspected of smuggling. They're now being held in Iran. We report tonight from on board the servicemen's ship as Britain calls for their return.
We've sought a full explanation of what happened and left the Iranian authorities in no doubt that we expect the immediate and safe return of our service personnel and boats.
Their capture is an uncomfortable reminder of when British servicemen were seized by Iran 3 years ago and paraded on television. Iran says it's holding the men and women because they strayed into its territorial waters. We'll be looking at the implications of today's incident. Also tonight, he's on trial for trying but failing to blow up London in July 2005. Now it's claimed he's linked to this man who succeeded 2 weeks earlier. Bob Woolmer, he was murdered, and police say it's likely he knew his killer. And the legacy of the slave trade money that built Britain, we have a special report.
And in BBC London news, warnings over the 2012 Olympics, ministers say it could attract illegal workers. And the July the 7th arrests. Police are tonight still searching a flat in East London.
Good evening. Britain and Iran are engaged in a diplomatic showdown tonight after 15 British Marines and sailors were captured by Iranian forces off the coast of southern Iraq. They were seized at gunpoint as they searched a ship suspected of smuggling. Iran said they'd strayed into its waters, which the Royal Navy denies. Britain has demanded the immediate release of the Royal Navy personnel, who are said to be safe and well. All of them were operating from HMS Cornwall in the Gulf. Our correspondent, Ian Pannell, is the only British television journalist on board and sent this exclusive report.
This is HMS Cornwall. We spent the last 2 days with the crew, watching them at work, patrolling the waters between Iran and Iraq. This morning began like the last, a routine stop and search mission. 15 sailors and Marines boarded this boat, suspicious about its cargo. But they were stopped and taken at gunpoint by the Iranian Navy. They're now being held at a base across the border.
My immediate concern is that their safety and their safe return to me is ensured. And I can assure all of the families who are listening out there that everything is being done to the highest level to ensure that safe return as soon as possible.
These are some of the crew who were captured. We joined them on the patrol only yesterday. There are sons and fathers among them, even a mother. But the Navy's confident it will get them home soon.
The crew on board HMS Cornwall are a tightly knit community. Of course, everybody's aware of the dangers that exist out at sea. But that doesn't mean that today's news hasn't come as a shock to everybody on board.
We're doing our best to get our people back.
The news was broken by the captain, and for a while, HMS Cornwall fell silent.
I'll let you know as soon as I have more information.
This has been a day of heightened tensions, with a significant amount of Iranian activity at sea. This was already a difficult job for the British Navy, and for now, it's just become harder. Ian Pannell, BBC News, in the Northern Arabian Gulf.
Well, the capture of the sailors and Marines is just the latest example of the growing tension between Britain and Iran in southern Iraq. British forces blame the Iranians for arming militias and supplying the technology used in the roadside bomb attacks, which have caused so many British casualties, as Gavin Hewitt reports.
Within hours of the sailors and Royal Marines being seized, the Iranian ambassador had been summoned to the Foreign Office in London. Potentially, this is a dangerous diplomatic crisis. The meeting was brief, 20 minutes. The comments crisp and to the point. Britain demanded the immediate release of its forces.
We've sought a full explanation of what happened and left the Iranian authorities in no doubt that we expect the immediate and safe return of our service personnel and boats. I understand the meeting with my permanent secretary was brisk but polite, but as I say, we have left them in no doubt. We want our personnel and equipment back.
On Iranian television tonight, a rather different version of events. They said the 15 British military personnel had illegally entered Iran's territorial waters. An official described it as an open incursion and blatant aggression, and they too summoned a British diplomat to their foreign ministry. The incident happened at the mouth of the Shatt al-Arab waterway. Historically, these have been disputed waters, but the British insist their forces were in Iraqi waters, and that is supported by the Americans, who were monitoring the movement of Iran's Revolutionary Guards.
They were in Iraqi territorial waters. We have been operating in those waters for years now. We know what the territorial lines are. We respect those territorial lines, and we expect the Iranians to respect those territorial lines as well.
We have been here before, 2004. Then 8 British sailors and Marines were detained by Iranian forces. They were paraded blindfolded and forced to apologize for their mistake. They were released after 3 days, although their equipment was never returned. So what happened this time? 2 boats with 15 personnel had left HMS Cornwall and boarded a merchant ship. It was a successful inspection. But as they were returning, they were surrounded by 6 Iranian boats operated by Revolutionary Guards and taken to Iran. This all comes at a time of tension between Britain and Iran. British commanders in Iraq told us today they believe Iran is behind many of the attacks on British forces in Basra. The timing, too, is interesting. Tomorrow, the UN Security Council meets to consider imposing further sanctions against Iran because of its nuclear program. So, is what happened out on the waterway today a local misunderstanding, or is Iran applying pressure? Gavin Hewitt, BBC News.
Well, let's get the latest now from Ian Pannell. He's on HMS Cornwall, the ship of the British service personnel who've been captured. Ian.
Well, Fiona, I think it's fair to say that really the mood here on board is quiet, is determined, but people feel that there are essentially 2 objectives. Primarily, of course, to try and achieve the release of their 15 comrades who are now over the waters behind me, being held by the Iranian Navy. But secondly, sort of business as usual. Interestingly, the captain of HMS Cornwall addressed the crew today on 2 separate occasions, and he said that really they had to carry on the business of making these waters safe. And there was a noticeable change in the mood today. Earlier on in the day, we'd been speaking to some of these crew members who'd gone out on this patrol. They were talking about what it was that they'd left behind in Britain, their families, the difficult decisions some of them had had to take, leaving behind children in the UK, but they felt that this was a duty that they should perform, and in many cases this was something they'd aspired to do for many years. And of course, when it became apparent that many of them were not coming home at the end of the day today, the mood on the boat changed, but everyone has rallied together. And I think the aspiration here is that this will be over sooner rather than later. And I think certainly the hope of the commanding officers is the events that have taken place here are possibly some kind of accident, that this will be remedied sooner. And certainly they're hoping in the next 24 to 48 hours to get some positive news. Fiona, back to you.
Ian, thanks very much. Well, all this week we've been recording the daily loss of life in Iraq. 4 years on from the invasion, there have been more bombings. The Deputy Prime Minister of Iraq was wounded in a suicide bombing which killed 9 people. It's thought the attacker was one of his bodyguards. At least 5 people died when a car bomb exploded in Habibiyah. And a further 26 unidentified bodies were found across Baghdad today. Since Monday, we've reported a total number of 179 people killed in Iraq this week. For the first time, it's been claimed that one of the men accused of trying but failing to bomb London in July 2005 conspired with the men who succeeded with such devastating results 2 weeks earlier. Mukhtar Saeed Ibrahim, on trial for plotting to cause an explosion, was alleged in court to have been in Pakistan at the same time as two of the bombers. He denies the claims. June Kelly was in court.
Mukhtar Ibrahim, the self-acknowledged leader of the men on trial, now accused of collaborating with the 7/7 bombers. He's alleged to have links with their leader, Mohammed Sadiq Khan, seen here in a martyrdom video which was played to the court.
We are at war and I'm a soldier.
The jury also saw a similar tape of one of his fellow suicide bombers, Shehzad Tanweer. Both men were in Pakistan in 2005. So too was Mukhtar Ibrahim, but he's denied meeting them. 52 people died on the 7th of July when a bus and 3 underground trains were blown up. 2 weeks later, the failed plot also involved a bus and 3 trains. Barrister Stephen Camlish QC, here on the left, questioned Mukhtar Ibrahim about the similarities. Referring to the 7/7 bombers, he asked, "Has there ever been any discussion between you and them on how to make effective bombs to start a bombing campaign in this country?" Ibrahim answered, "No." Tavistock Square, the scene of the 7/7 bus bomb. The court was told that the devices on that day had something in common with those of 21/7. They were both hydrogen peroxide based. These were said to be the only 2 occasions the authorities in this country had come across this. In court cross-examination, Stephen Camlish asked Ibrahim, "You see the coincidence, don't you?" "When you say this fact, yes," was Ibrahim's answer. Mukhtar Ibrahim caught on CCTV on the bus he's accused of targeting. He maintains that all the 21/7 devices were hoaxes. This is disputed by one of his co-defendants. All 6 men on trial deny conspiracy to murder and conspiracy to cause explosions. June Kelly, BBC News.
After yesterday's arrest, police have been given another 6 days to question 3 men over the July the 7th bombings. 2 of the men were picked up by police at Manchester Airport as they prepared to board a flight to Pakistan. The third was arrested at an address in the Beeston area of Leeds. Bob Woolmer, the head of the Pakistan cricket team, was murdered, and most likely by someone he knew. That's the conclusion of police in Jamaica. They said he'd been strangled in his hotel room shortly after Pakistan were knocked out of the World Cup by Ireland. Kevin Geary has the latest.
Observer and Gleaner.
The strident headlines put it starkly, but couldn't hope to convey the shock to the world of cricket of the Jamaican police's announcement.
Mr. Woolmer's death was due to asphyxia as a result of manual strangulation. The matter of Mr. Woolmer's death is now being treated by the Jamaica police as a case of murder.
That such a gentleman, devoted to what still professes to be a noble game, should have been killed, ostensibly in its name, almost beggars belief. Today at Bob Woolmer's home in Cape Town, the symbols of condolence reflected the grief and incomprehension felt throughout the cricketing world.
It is very difficult for the family to come to terms with, and they have no idea why this happened. To the best of the family's knowledge, there is absolutely nothing to suggest Bob was involved in match fixing, and contrary to reports, we can confirm there is nothing in any book Bob has written that would explain this situation, and there were no threats received.
So why did it happen? Bob Woolmer's body was found in his hotel room where there'd been no signs of a struggle or forced entry, suggesting he may have known who killed him. He had been writing a book, but it apparently didn't touch on corruption. Even so, as the Pakistan team moved hotels, having all been questioned by police, there was inevitably speculation about links to wrongdoing. Something that had invaded Woolmer's life when coached to South Africa during the Hansi Cronje match-fixing affair.
There's a distinct possibility that he knew more than most because he was involved so closely with the South African team when they went through all those problems. And of course, when people that are, if they are worried about what might or might not be said by people that were close to situations around that time, and they hear that Bob Woolmer's going to write a book, I mean, they don't have to know what he's going to write about.
But that's only one possible motive. Pakistan's catastrophic defeats to Ireland and West Indies, which ended their World Cup, might also have inflamed fanatical supporters. or something totally unconnected may be responsible. Whatever, now it's cricket's reputation that's besmirched.
I think it'll take a long time to recover from this, and this, unfortunately, World Cup will be remembered for the wrong reasons.
The World Cup, though, will continue, albeit now under a forbidding cloud. Kevin Geary, BBC News.
For more on this, we're joined now by the BBC's cricket correspondent, Jonathan Agnew. Jonathan, obviously this is a shock to the cricketing world. What more can you tell us about what's going on out there tonight in the Caribbean?
Well, I can tell you that the show will go on. That's very much the recurring theme we hear from the authorities, and it will do. I know for a start that the South Africans need some persuasion to carry on playing here. Alan Donald, one of their former players today, came out and said that it should be cancelled. A number of their players were coached by Bob Woolmer before he joined the Pakistanis. They are now deciding they will carry on and play, and they're playing Australia on Saturday. I spoke to the author of that book that was referred to there today. He insists it's nothing but a coaching manual, and there's absolutely nothing about match fixing in it. The Pakistan team have moved to Montego Bay. They are still in Jamaica, and they are hopeful, even confident, that tomorrow they'll be allowed to fly back to Pakistan via London, but we're waiting confirmation of that from the Jamaican police.
Okay, Jonathan, thanks very much. Coming up on tonight's programme, death on the web. A man broadcasts his own suicide live on the internet. Europe will unveil a new declaration this weekend, which controversially will hint at the return of the EU constitution, rejected by the French and Dutch 2 years ago. On the 50th anniversary of the European Union, the Berlin Declaration will emphasise the common goals of fighting terrorism and tackling climate change. Live now to our Europe editor, Mark Mardell, who's in Berlin. Mark.
Europe is our common future. That's how the declaration, which will be signed on Sunday in the building behind me, ends up. But it's the much more mundane sounding words about renewing Europe's political base that will be tricky, because what it does mean is bring back the constitution. There's a lot of countries that want that, and it's extremely controversial. The war graves of France, poignant but of the past. This new declaration will say that Europe has learnt the painful lessons of a history marked by bloody conflict. The Treaty of Rome, signed 50 years ago, did grow out of a determination that the horrors of the First and Second World Wars would never be repeated. But what the leaders of the 6 countries actually put their signatures to was this, a big fat rulebook governing how they would pool their power. The Berlin Declaration calls for Europe to renew its political basis. And the Italian Prime Minister told me that means new rules, a constitution.
I am for the constitution. If we have a united Europe, we survive. If not, we are dead. So I'm absolutely convinced that this is a process that is irreversible, absolutely irreversible.
The European Constitution was rejected by the French and Dutch people in referendums 2 years ago, but many governments are enthusiastic about bringing back much of it in a new treaty, and few want to risk a popular vote. But at Copenhagen University, Danish students we spoke to were unanimous. They should have a say.
I think they should hear the Danish population first. They should be heard.
People don't always agree with the politicians, and I think that it's very important that we also get our vote in this whole big system.
A new EU-wide poll indicates that if a treaty transferred more powers to the European Union, 75% of people would want a referendum. In Britain, that rises to 83%. But how would they vote? In the EU as a whole, there's an equal split, 41% for, 41% against. But in Britain, 21% would vote to give the EU more powers, 67% would vote no. The declaration talks of Europe overcoming the unnatural divisions of communism, but inside Prague Castle, the Czech president is unimpressed. He says it's ridiculous this declaration has been written in secrecy and calls it Orwellian Eurospeak. He says the EU doesn't need new rules.
There is no crisis, so we are really not in a hurry. In a hurry are just the people, the Europeans, who want to accelerate the unification process. They are in a hurry. The normal people in Europe are not in a hurry.
But those who are in a hurry argue this does have to happen quickly. They want a new treaty agreed by the beginning of next year at the very latest. Now, senior Downing Street sources are telling me tonight the government has promised a referendum on any constitution or anything that looks like it, and that promise holds. But really, that would be a nightmare fighting a vote like that. So what they're going to try to attain is a treaty that's so small, so insignificant, nobody would want to vote on it. But that's not the ambition of other countries.
Okay, Mark, thanks. The BBC's correspondent in Gaza, Alan Johnson, has now been missing for 12 days. It's thought he's been kidnapped. The BBC has been unable to contact him and continues to be concerned for his safety. A man has broadcast his own suicide live on the internet. Kevin Whittrick from Telford in Shropshire hanged himself while using a webcam in an internet chat room. Officers had been alerted by another internet user who was one of a number of people who apparently witnessed the death on Wednesday. Here's John Brain.
Kevin Whittrick died alone, but his was also the most public of apparent suicides. The body of the 42-year-old was found at his home near Telford on Wednesday night. It's believed he'd hanged himself. In the moments leading up to his death, Mr. Whittrick went into an internet chat room and via his webcam announced he planned to commit suicide. Eyewitnesses say he then killed himself while they watched. This woman described what she'd seen in her blog.
I've seen someone kill himself live on webcam. He took a chair, wrapped the cord from a ceiling light around his neck and then let himself fall. We all watched it, thinking it was a joke, and now it's turned out to be true.
It is dreadful. 42-year-old man, it's just unbelievable.
He was talking to someone on the internet over the webcam, and they said that he was harming himself.
The case has revived calls for increased internet monitoring. Roy and Barbara Boffey's son Philip took his own life after discussing it in a chat room.
Once people are into these sites, they exchange precise knowledge of how to take their lives, how low they feel, what they want to do. And of course they are in an exclusive, downbeat atmosphere.
It's believed around 15 people watched Mr. Whittrick's macabre broadcast. Some dialed 999, but it's reported some others egged him on. The material has now been retrieved from the internet and is being examined by the police. John Brain, BBC News, Birmingham.
Sunday will mark the 200th anniversary of the law which was passed to abolish the slave trade in Britain. Before 1807, for more than 2 centuries, this country was at the heart of a hugely lucrative transatlantic trade in African slaves who were forced to work on plantations in the British colonies. Men, women and children were transported in horrific conditions on cargo ships to the Caribbean and North America. It's thought about 24 million Africans were sold into slavery. The slave trade was far removed from the lives of most Britons, but its proceeds brought massive wealth and fueled the Industrial Revolution. Clive Myrie reports on its legacy.
This land, Britain, its character, consciousness, has been shaped by many forces. But one important influence on who we are as a people is little acknowledged: our role in the transatlantic slave trade. The monarchy, our banks, major institutions and businesses, the very fabric of our society was tied to slavery. Glasgow's Gallery of Modern Art was once the seat of a tobacco lord made rich by trading human beings.
I'm Glasgow born and bred, and I did not know that was born in the proceeds of slavery.
And now you do know. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's absolutely shocking.
In Chester, at the Old Port, slave ships plied the River Dee. Goods sailed to West Africa in exchange for human cargo, bound for British plantations in the West Indies.
Never heard that about Chester. I've never really classed Chester to do with the slave trade, where I do come from Liverpool, and I do accept that Liverpool was part of the slave trade.
In Bristol, there's no record of slaves being sold on Black Boy Hill. It's a local legend. But some of the city's beautiful Regency terraces were built by rich plantation owners profiting from slave labour. Brunel's Clifton Suspension Bridge is a symbol of the Industrial Revolution, a seismic change in society, partly funded by 300 years of African bondage.
So Britain's role in the slave trade and some of the fruits of the wealth it created are everywhere. But so what? Why should any of us and society in general be concerned about events that happened so long ago? Why does that chapter in history matter today?
Well, look at the faces of some of Britain's citizens and you'll see why it matters. Multiculturalism in the UK is an abiding legacy of slavery and empire. So too are prejudice and racism. Esther Stanford is a campaigner who believes the descendants of slaves are owed reparations, not just for the pain of their ancestors, but their own anguish too.
It was only in 1976 that there was Race Relations Act. So what that means is that we had supposedly formal legal equality in Britain. So the legacies of enslavement are all around. It's not something that happened hundreds of years ago and is somehow in our distant past. How do the victims, the descendants of enslaved Africans, how do they fare today in Britain? Is there formal equality? And I would say not.
Paying for the sins of the past isn't about giving money to individuals. Instead, a business once tied to the slave trade could fund a program for black employees to trace their ancestry. That would be a form of reparations. But where does the buck really stop? Yes, Lloyd's of London and the founders of Barclays Bank had links to slave traders, but they did nothing illegal. It was a trade sanctioned by the Crown and Parliament. So it's an apology from Tony Blair on behalf of the nation that campaigners really want.
Something that they are doing actively.
But the MP for Tottenham, David Lammy, himself a descendant of slaves in Guyana, says that shouldn't be the focus of this year's anniversary.
The most important thing about remembering the past is that it hopefully helps to navigate the future. It is also a moment where we celebrate ordinary people, ordinary British men and women alongside slaves who campaigned, who boycotted, who petitioned to end this evil trade.
Words of regret, official apologies, reparations. How can we ever really hope to atone for the scale of the brutality and the lasting damage caused? One thing is clear, for the sake of future generations, ours is a past some might not care to remember, but that all of us should never forget. Clive Myrie, BBC News.
The legacy of the slave trade in Britain. And the 10 o'clock news hour continues on BBC News 24 with tomorrow's papers, a business roundup, and in Sports Day at 10:30, India look like they're out of the Cricket World Cup. Tonight they lost to Sri Lanka by 69 runs. And on BBC One, I'll be back with the headlines after we joined our news teams where you are. Bye for now.
Good evening from BBC London News. I'm Geraint Hughes. Doubts are being raised over whether the London 2012 Olympics will really be the boom for East London workers as promised. A London Assembly report said poor English and the wrong type of construction skills would block locals' chances of taking the jobs on offer. Sarah Harris reports.
For 2 years, Hayford Kofi from Canning Town trained to be a construction worker to make the most of jobs being created by the Olympics. But after months on the dole, he still can't find work.
Every day I come to job centre and everything, but I still can't get it. I ain't even got no reply yet. They'll say, leave your number, do this, and they'll get contact to you, but still no contact.
So do you think you'll benefit from the Olympic job?
Not really.
Over the coming years, around 50,000 jobs are promised as a result of Olympic regeneration. It's estimated there are about 720,000 people of workable age in this part of London. A quarter of them have no qualifications and nearly 60% are unemployed. Research by a team at the London Assembly reached the conclusion that not enough is being done to help local people make themselves employable.
It's absolutely essential that in an area of high deprivation such as this, local people are given the skills so that they can apply for Olympic jobs. Otherwise, the Olympics will have failed in one of its key elements to deliver lasting change after the Games.
Local people fear the Olympic site will look like the neighbouring Docklands, with lots of benefits for outsiders and little for them. But the London Development Agency denies not enough's being done.
We will work with the Skills Council to find most of the English language training in the 5 boroughs and make sure that we can deliver as much as possible using our money and their money to local people, so they're not disadvantaged in securing jobs associated with the Games.
But according to the London Assembly report, unless training is provided in English and relevant construction skills, then East Londoners will miss out on the Olympics jobs boom they were promised. Sarah Harris, BBC London News.
Police have been searching a flat in East London tonight in connection with the July the 7th bombing arrests. A college in Whitechapel has also been searched. Detectives believe at least one of the 3 men arrested used the facilities there. Computers and files have been taken away and the college closed. One lecturer told BBC London that he was surprised.
I've been teaching here for over a week now, and I was expecting the college to be open, so I'm very surprised indeed. It's closed, yes. I didn't expect, I was here yesterday, and to come this afternoon to see it closed, it's very surprising to me, yes.
15 people have been charged after a series of raids carried out in London on Wednesday. Officers seized false passports, driving licences and foreign identity documents, along with £40,000 in cash. 16 high-profile London addresses, including Downing Street and Buckingham Palace, are to be made protected sites so trespassers can be dealt with more easily. Under the new rules, offenders could be jailed for up to 6 months. And a march marking the abolition of the slave trade reached Greenwich today. The 200-mile March of the Abolitionists has seen a core group of walkers make their way from Hull to London. The aim of the event is to apologise for the role of Europe and the Church in the slave trade. Now, it's cost more than £750 million and taken nearly 7 years to build. But the new Wembley Stadium will finally stage its first major match tomorrow. Mark Bright has this report.
Bright! And in the end, the easiest goal you could wish for.
That was one of the proudest moments of my career, scoring on the hallowed turf at Wembley. Last weekend wasn't a bad moment either, scoring the first goal at the new Wembley, but the hallowed turf wasn't quite up to scratch. Indeed, the turf was still cutting up when England's under-21s trained.
Like any new stadia, you know, in the first year we have to find out about environments, the shadow that we get over the pitch. We are totally in 100% shade during the winter months. So we know we've got still things to work on.
While the pitch needed a bit of TLC, the stadium looked spectacular, but allowed plenty of time to travel. Car parking is at a premium, so public transport will have to take the strain. 2 stations serve the stadium. The majority will pass through Wembley Park Tube Station. The other is the Overland, Wembley Stadium Station. Now, these pictures are from this morning. Workers were frantically trying to get the White Horse Bridge from that station ready, so just allowed plenty of time.
These are events that we will be looking at that. We'll have 60,000 here tomorrow, which is an awful lot. The stadium is built around the fact that it will be able to cope with 90,000.
Travel chaos at new stadiums in London isn't new. Access to and from Arsenal's Emirates Stadium has been criticised. However, all parties involved with Wembley admit lessons will be learnt from tomorrow's final test event in time for the FA Cup final on the 19th of May.
Now, from Brent to Bollywood, one London man's given up the streetlights of Wembley for the bright lights of Mumbai. Upam Patel was spotted by a talent scout on Oxford Street, and he's now a Bollywood hero. Today, he popped back to a local school to talk about his road to fame.
I went to India. I walked the ramp for India Fashion Week 2003, and it became an overnight phenomenon. Suddenly, I was signed for 14 campaigns, 23 shows. I was signed by the biggest modeling agency in India, and my life just changed.
Now let's get a check on what the weather has in store for us with Peter.
Thanks very much. Spring is going to make a comeback over the weekend, and so will British summertime. Don't forget to put your clocks forward an hour on Saturday night. Saturday itself is going to be a rather cloudy day, and like today where the cloud thickens up, there could be a little bit of rain around. And then on Sunday, we should see some sunshine. Rather cloudy to the east of London, the best of the sunshine the further west you happen to be. And next week, after a sunny start, looks as though we'll get some rain later in the week. That's the forecast.
We'll be back tomorrow at 10 to 5 on BBC One. Now it's back to Fiona with the main national headlines.
Tonight's main news. Britain has demanded the immediate release of 15 British sailors and Marines seized by Iranian forces. They were captured at gunpoint while searching a ship off the coast of Iraq. And Jamaican police say the Pakistan cricket coach Bob Woolmer was murdered and probably knew his killer. Newsnight starting on BBC Two, but from all of us on the 10 o'clock team, good night.
Hello, it looks like spring is going to make a bit of a return, with things slowly turning a bit brighter over the next few days and a little bit milder as well, so that's good news for many, I'm sure. The weekend seeing temperatures just starting to rise a little bit, and that theme continuing into next week, but it will depend on whether or not you get the sunshine. Now, some of us struggled to see the sunshine today. We had a weak weather front coming in across the east that kept things rather grey and cold for many of us, but that weak weather front is now on its way westward, so that's allowing some clearer weather to develop in its wake, and with those clear skies we're seeing quite a frost develop, particularly across northern and western parts of Britain. Now, across the heart of the UK, here some low cloud will be forming through the night, so that should help to keep frost at bay, with temperatures up at, say, 3 or 4 degrees or so. But elsewhere, well, temperatures will be dipping down to close to zero. So come the morning, it'll be quite a cold start to the day, but any frost and any lingering mist or fog patches should quickly lift away with that sunshine, so it's looking quite nice for Scotland. I think the east will struggle a little bit more with some cloud, and that'll be the story along all of these North Sea coasts right through the day. It'll be fairly grey. I think you'll notice a weather front not too far away, just hanging out there in the North Sea waiting to come in. So with a bit of a breeze, it'll feel quite chilly. Some low cloud around across the Midlands, perhaps affecting, say, Somerset, the Welsh Marches as well. But head out towards Cornwall, looking lovely here. Quite good, I think, for a walk on the beach in the morning. Similar story for Cardigan Bay. For Northern Ireland, well, I think we'll see some sunshine through the morning. A bit of cloud perhaps lingering around, but that will tend to lift into the afternoon. So as the day wears on, where we've got that low cloud across the Midlands, I think that will tend to dissipate, the sunshine getting to work here. And then, well, west will be best for the sunshine into the afternoon, whereas further east, a bit more disappointing as that weak weather front moves in. It will increase the cloud and we'll see a few spots of light rain and drizzle here and there. And with a breeze coming in off the sea, it'll tend to feel quite chilly again at around about 9 degrees. But where we've got the sunshine, 12 or 13 should really feel quite nice. Now, through the weekend, I think we will see even eastern areas begin to brighten up. So come Sunday, our weather front is beginning to push its way out towards the west again. Still the risk of some more cloud and a few showers down towards the southwest, but for most of us, a fine and dry day on Sunday with good sunny spells and highs of up to 14 degrees. And we continue to see those temperatures just rising slightly into the beginning of next week as well. So Monday, another good day with sunny spells and highs of up to 15. So it's looking quite pleasant, I think. Plenty of dry weather, some warmer weather too. Enjoy your weekend. Good night.
This is BBC One. Now, a budget response by the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman.
Good evening. Now that Gordon Brown has given his last budget, I want to look at his record. There are pluses and minuses. Britain has a strong economy and a good record of creating jobs. Making the Bank of England independent of political interference, originally a Liberal Democrat policy, has brought Britain real financial stability. But the same Gordon Brown has undermined occupational and private pensions. Indeed, nearly half of all pensioners now depend on means-tested benefits. Millions can't get onto the housing ladder or have had to borrow beyond their means to do so. And now that inflation is again at worrying levels, we can expect higher interest rates and bigger debt servicing burdens. And as Chancellor, Gordon Brown has signed the cheques, paying for all the enormous waste of this government. Billions of pounds of your money has been thrown at everything from the Millennium Dome to bureaucracy and the NHS. £5 billion have been spent on the Iraq War alone, the equivalent of 70 new hospitals. In this budget, he cut the standard rate of income tax, but then clawed it back by doubling the 10p tax rate to 20p and increasing national insurance. As a result, many people on low incomes will now pay more income tax, not less, and others will become more dependent on complicated means-tested benefits. He had absolutely nothing to say about changing the unfair council tax, which rises relentlessly and hits pensioners particularly hard. Looking forward, our priority is to restore the public's faith that taxes are fair and give value for money. In the past, we have supported increases in taxation to pay for investment in public services, but that money has been raised and spent, and we oppose further increases in the overall level of tax. They're not necessary. What we want to see are fairer taxes not higher taxes. We want to lift millions of people out of tax and national insurance altogether with genuine tax cuts for those on low and middle incomes. There is then a genuine incentive to work and save. Now, of course, all this has to be paid for. And we're clear and honest about what we would do. We would tax polluters. For example, at present, motorists pay heavy taxes on their fuel, but airlines pay none at all. We would make the airline and other polluting industries pay for the pollution they cause, and that's surely the fair and right way to do it. Under Gordon Brown, the gap between rich and poor has grown much wider, and Liberal Democrats will make sure that the super-rich pay their fair share, so that tax for ordinary families can be cut. We also need to be tough on wasteful public spending. The national budget's tight, and if more money has to be found for schools and universities, law and order, healthcare or transport, something else will have to go. While frontline services are now being cut, this government is making some big and unnecessary spending commitments which are frankly not affordable. It's promising new nuclear power stations, even though the taxpayers already had to provide £70 billion for safe disposal of the old ones. It wants a compulsory ID card scheme, which could cost £18 billion and yet may not even work. Another £18 billion is being paid out to computer companies for an NHS IT system, which doctors don't want. Another £6 billion is being wasted on Eurofighters designed for the Cold War. And Mr. Blair has now rushed prematurely to commit Britain to spending up to £70 billion on new Trident submarines. These are enormous sums. What is certain is that the government cannot continue spending your money like water. Governments, like families, have to save in order to spend. Liberal Democrats believe that it's time to have a serious, grown-up debate with the British people on what we can afford and what our national priorities really are. And time to make sure that our taxes are fairer, but not higher, and are properly used.
That was a budget response by the Liberal Democrat Treasury spokesman. Hey, the new series of Friday Night with Jonathan Ross starts next on BBC One.
Welcome to the UK's biggest ever quiz. Everyone can play, but only one person will win. This is the National Lottery People's Quiz. Could you crack 10 in a row? Feeling up for it?
Ready as I'll ever be.
Get in there, Ritza. Don't let me down, will you? Good luck.
That's correct.
Or not.
Who wrote Handel's Messiah?
Enid Blyton. Starts tomorrow at 7:35 on BBC One, including the live draws from Lottery HQ.
Be honest, Friday nights have not been quite the same without him. Well, that's all about to change now on BBC One. So much more than just a chat show. It's the new series of Friday Night with Jonathan